welcome to the Sleeping Hourglass. Tonight, we drift back to an ancient mountain pass, where courage once stood patiently against the slow, inevitable tide of empire. This is the story of Leonidas and his 300, not as thunderous legends, but as human souls making measured choices beneath a heavy sky. If this calm corner of time brings you comfort, you're always welcome to support it with a quiet like or subscribe. The story of Leonidas does not begin at the hot gates, where arrows fell like rain and the earth trembled beneath the tread of countless men. It begins far earlier, in a land both rugged and restrained, where mountains hold valleys in their arms, and the Eurotas River threads silver through the earth. This is Sparta, not a city of ease or grandeur, but of discipline, silence, and steel. Sparta is a city forged by necessity. Unlike Athens, with its open harbours and love of debate, or Corinth with its trade and wealth, Sparta rises from a harsher soil. Its wealth is not of coin but of conquest, its survival dependent not on clever words but on sharpened spears. Centuries before Leonidas, the Spartans subdued their neighbours, the Messenians, reducing them to helots, bound labourers whose toil fed the city. This uneasy balance created a society always alert, always braced against rebellion. And so Sparta turned inward, shaping its sons and daughters into guardians of a fragile order. Here, life is pared down to its essentials. No gilded palaces rise above the streets, no statues rival those of Athens. Instead, discipline itself is the city's ornament. To be Spartan is to live with less, to speak with fewer words, to walk with the quiet certainty that one's body and spirit belong not to the self but to the polis, the state. It is within this crucible that Leonidas is born. He is not yet king, not yet a figure of legend. He is a child of the Eurypontid royal house, but in Sparta, even a prince is no more than a boy among others. From the moment of birth, Spartan infants are judged by the elders. The strong are permitted to live, the frail are cast aside, not out of cruelty, but from a grim conviction that the city must be spared weakness. Leonidas survives this first test. His life is not spared for privilege, but for strength. And so, at the age of 7, he is taken from his mother's arms and placed into the agoge, the Spartan system of education that is less a schooling than a forging. Here, childhood is stripped away as boys are bound to one another in groups, living under the stern gaze of instructors. They are taught to endure hunger, to embrace pain, to sleep beneath open skies. Discipline in the agoge is relentless. Boys are encouraged to steal food to survive, but punished harshly if caught. Not because stealing is forbidden, but because clumsiness, the failure to conceal, reveals weakness. They are taught to speak little, to answer in brief, sharp words, the laconic tongue that will one day give rise to legend. Each lesson is designed not to comfort but to strip away softness, to leave only sinew, silence, and resolve. Leonidas grows among these boys. He learns that to be Spartan is to share in scarcity, to rely not on the comfort of home, but on the brotherhood of companions. His body hardens under the strain of running, wrestling, and training with spear and shield. But more than body, his mind is shaped by the rhythm of endurance. He learns to be patient where others would cry out, to hold steady when others would falter. Around him, Sparta itself is steeped in ritual. Men live not for private gain, but for the public good. The kings, for Sparta is ruled by 2, one from each royal house, are not absolute monarchs, but figures bound by law and by the council of elders, the Gerousia. Even royalty is hemmed in by duty. This, 2, Leonidas absorbs that power is never for indulgence but for service. Sparta's laws are said to come from Lycurgus, a lawgiver half veiled in myth, who taught the people to live simply, to scorn gold, and to bind themselves to one another with iron discipline. Whether Lycurgus was a single man or many, his shadow lingers still. In his world, children are not coddled, but tempered. Wives are not hidden, but strong, and men are not free to pursue their whims. For all belong to Sparta. It is tempting, from the outside, to see only cruelty in such a life, yet within Sparta there is also a strange equality. The poor and the noble share in the same training, eat at the same mess halls, sleep beneath the same stars. Bonds are forged not of wealth, but of endurance. In this crucible, Leonidas learns not only to obey, but to belong. The agoge is not only about spears and shields, it is about silence, about shaping a boy into someone who does not flinch at hardship, who does not cling to self when the whole demands sacrifice. Leonidas grows not with the brilliance of a strategist, nor with the eloquence of an orator, but with the steady patience of one who endures. His strength is quiet, a flame that does not dazzle but does not go out. Beyond the training grounds, the rhythms of Spartan life deepen the lesson. Festivals are held to honor the gods, particularly Artemis Orthia, whose altar sometimes witnesses the ritual scourging of boys, a rite not of cruelty but of proof. Music and dance are not absent, but they serve discipline, weaving order into even joy. Women, too, stand apart from their Greek counterparts. They are taught to be strong, to manage estates while men are at war, to give birth to warriors who will not shrink from death. Leonidas grows in a city where even mothers remind their sons to return with their shields, or upon them. In these years, the boy who will one day stand at Thermopylae learns not to think of life as his own possession. He belongs to Sparta. His laughter, his pain, his strength, all are threads in the fabric of a people who have chosen survival through severity. The roots of courage are not sudden sparks. They are embers tended from birth, glowing steadily beneath hardship. And yet, even within this hardness, there are quiet moments. A boy lying beneath the stars, listening to the night sounds of Laconia. Companions sharing stolen food, bound by both hunger and laughter. The slow rhythm of the Eurotas flowing through the valley, whispering that even in discipline there is beauty. Leonidas's roots sink into this soil, harsh yet alive. When we think of Thermopylae, we imagine the clash of spears, the thunder of feet, the roar of countless voices. But before all that, there is a child learning to endure, to obey, to belong, and finally to lead. The man at the hot gates is born from the boy at the agoge. For Leonidas, courage is not sudden. It is slow, patient, and steady. Like stone shaped by years of wind, the roots of Sparta run deep within him. And though he does not yet know it, these roots will one day hold against the greatest tide of empire the world has ever seen. In the quiet of these beginnings, Leonidas grows not as a king, but as a boy tempered by silence and stone. Soon, his place within Sparta's bloodline will draw him nearer to destiny, and the bonds of family, of brothers and of kingship, will begin to shape his path. The boy who becomes king does not rise from the brilliance of birth order. He grows in the shadow of brothers. Leonidas is born to the Eurypontid house, one of the two royal lines of Sparta. This house, like its twin the Argead line, holds the burden of kingship. For centuries, two kings have ruled side by side, their power restrained by laws and by councils, yet still standing as the guardians of the city. They are generals in war, priests in ritual, and symbols of Sparta's bond to its past. But within the Eurypontid family, Leonidas is not first in line. His elder brothers, Dorieus and Cleomenes, carry the clearer claim to rule, and so, as a younger son, Leonidas's life seems destined not for crowns but for service. In many kingdoms, younger sons fade into obscurity. But Sparta is not like other kingdoms. Here even princes walk the same path of discipline, endure the same harsh agoge, eat from the same rough mess tables. Rank does not soften the Spartan law. Leonidas's childhood is not gilded, but ground into the same stone as his peers, and perhaps it is this very equality that shapes him. Not brilliance or entitlement, but endurance. Cleomenes the elder is bold, cunning, unpredictable. History remembers him as both daring and unstable, a man of schemes and sudden turns. Dorieus, the second brother, burns with pride, convinced of his superiority, resentful when Cleomenes rises above him to the throne. Dorieus seeks his fortune beyond Sparta, leading expeditions to carve out new domains, only to meet failure and an early grave. And then there is Leonidas, third in line, not first, not second. His name does not echo in youthful stories of ambition. Instead, he stands quiet in the background, watching, waiting, learning. His strength lies not in noise, but in patience, in the ability to endure what is given rather than to seize what is not. In this way, Leonidas's life becomes a mirror of Sparta itself. For Sparta, too, is not built on brilliance or display, but on slow discipline, on the quiet endurance of centuries. Other cities shine with temples and theatres, with philosophies and plays. Sparta endures with silence, with simplicity, with the steel of spears held steady. So too does Leonidas endure. Family in Sparta is never entirely private. Each household, though bound by blood, is woven into the larger tapestry of the city. Sons are given to the agoge. Daughters are raised to strengthen future generations. Fathers may guide, but the polis shapes more deeply. Still, within this web of state and discipline, the family bond remains. Leonidas grows within the circle of brothers whose choices will one day shift the weight of destiny onto his shoulders. There must have been evenings, quiet ones, when the brothers sat together, speaking in few words, their voices carrying across the courtyards of the royal house. Cleomenes with his restless fire, Dorieus with his proud certainty, and Leonidas listening, weighing, learning. In those moments, no one would have guessed that the third brother would one day bear the heaviest burden. The crown of Sparta is not only inheritance but responsibility. A king must lead in war, yet he is never free to rule as he pleases. He is bound by the laws of Lycurgus, by the council of elders, by the ephors who watch even kings. Sparta does not tolerate tyranny. It tolerates only duty. And so the throne is less a prize than a weight. For the younger son, the one who seems unlikely, this weight may come suddenly when death or misfortune clears the path. Leonidas does not seek the crown. He lives as a Spartan among Spartans, his destiny hidden in the shadows. Perhaps this unknowing is what shapes him most deeply. To live without expectation of rule is to live with humility, to grow without the constant burden of ambition. And when fate, quiet and unrelenting, one day turns its gaze upon him, he is ready not because he sought it, but because he endured. History is filled with men who rise unexpectedly. Sometimes their greatness is sudden, like a flame igniting. But for Leonidas, greatness is steady, patient, Like a mountain formed by centuries of wind, he does not seize, he does not boast. He endures, and by enduring he becomes. The family line itself reflects the fragility of human plans. Cleomenes's rule, though powerful, ends in tragedy and madness. Dorieus, so certain of his destiny, falls far from home, and so the weight, once distant, comes at last to Leonidas. The quiet brother, the one overshadowed, is left standing. The path is cleared not by ambition, but by fate's slow, relentless hand. In this, we glimpse something deeper about Sparta and about life itself. That strength is not always loud. That destiny does not always favor the firstborn. That patience can outlast pride. Leonidas's story reminds us that history does not belong only to those who grasp, but also to those who endure in silence, waiting for the moment when their steadiness becomes the city's salvation. Beyond the family's private story, the larger tale of Greece stirs. To the east, the Persian Empire stretches like a vast shadow, its demands pressing upon the small city-states of Hellas. Ambassadors will come, bearing words of submission. Armies will march, like tides rolling westward, and in this storm it will not be the most ambitious, but the most steadfast who must hold. Leonidas's years of patience prepare him for this, for a role not of conquest, but of resistance. We might imagine him now, still young, walking beneath the Spartan sky, feeling both the weight of brothers before him and the strange lightness of one without expectation. The city does not yet look to him. History does not yet whisper his name. And yet, in that quiet obscurity, the roots of his courage deepen. Leonidas's brothers are remembered for brilliance and for downfall, but he is remembered for something else. The stillness that stands when storms rage, the silence that does not falter when noise surrounds. His life among brothers is not wasted in shadow. It is tempered there, it is made patient there. The bond of blood is both gift and burden. From Cleomenes he witnesses the dangers of cunning without balance. From Dorieus he learns that pride can lead far afield, only to falter. From himself he learns that to endure quietly may one day be the truest strength of all. And so, from this family, from this house, the man who will stand at Thermopylae begins to emerge, not in brilliance, not in glory, but in patience. The story of Leonidas's bloodline is also the story of Sparta, 2 kings, 2 houses, balance and restraint, duty bound by destiny. Even kings are not free. They are woven into the city as tightly as soldiers in the phalanx. Every child belongs to the state. Every king belongs to fate. And in the quiet shadows of brothers, Leonidas learns that to be king is not to command, but to serve. In the hush of family shadows, Leonidas waits, patient, steady, unseen. Soon the shadow will lengthen, cast not by brothers, but by an empire rising in the east, and the Persian tide will begin to darken the horizon. History does not move only in the valleys of Greece. Far beyond the mountains, far beyond the narrow plains where the Spartans train and the Athenians debate, another power swells. Its breadth is so great that it seems to gather all horizons into itself. It is the Persian Empire, a vastness of rivers and deserts, of mountains and palaces, of kings who sit upon golden thrones and command men by the tens of thousands. To the Greeks, who live in scattered polis, city-states small, proud, and quarrelsome, Persia is less a neighbour than a continent in motion. Where Greece's many voices, Persia is one. Where Greece is fragile in number, Persia is endless. The Persians do not arrive suddenly. Their empire has roots that stretch deep into the soil of Mesopotamia, into the old kingdoms of the Near East. First came Cyrus, the great founder who bound together Medes and Persians, and with patient brilliance stretched his realm from the mountains of Anatolia to the valleys of the Indus. Cyrus built with tolerance as well as conquest, letting peoples keep their customs, their gods, their voices, so long as they bent the knee. Then came Cambyses, his son, who carried the empire into Egypt until the Nile itself bowed to Persian kings. And after him, Darius, organizer, administrator, visionary. Darius the Great carved roads across the empire, roads that tied mountains to coasts, capitals to provinces. He minted coin, regulated laws, built palaces at Persepolis and Susa, and stretched his hand further than any before. The empire, at its height, is a world unto itself, 20 satrapies, provinces governed with firm loyalty, armies drawn from every corner, Medes and Persians, Egyptians and Babylonians, Indians and Scythians, each bringing their strength to the King of Kings. To the east, beyond Persia, lie deserts and the rising sun. To the west, the Argene, and here, in these waters, Greece trembles at the edge of empire. The Persians send envoys to the Greek cities, bearing not swords but words. Their demand is simple: earth and water. To give earth is to surrender the land. To give water is to surrender life. The words are ritual, but their meaning is clear: submission. Many cities, seeing the power of Persia, bow. Better to bend than to be broken. But for others, proud, quarrelsome, unyielding, these tokens are chains. Sparta and Athens refuse. The messengers do not return alive. Thus begins the long shadow of war. The first clash comes not under Xerxes, but under his father, Darius. In 490 BCE, the Persian king sends an expedition across the sea. Its target is Athens, the proud democracy that has supported rebellions in Ionia, the western edge of Persian lands. The Persians land at Marathon, a plain not far from the Athenian walls. Here, in fields of grass and open sky, the fate of Greece wavers. The Athenians, led by Miltiades, charge against the larger Persian host. Their hoplites, armoured and disciplined, drive back the archers and cavalry of the east. Against expectation, the Athenians win. The victory is not only military but spiritual. It proves that Persia is not invincible. From Marathon comes not only triumph, but a messenger. The runner who carries news to Athens, his breath breaking, his body failing as he delivers the word. We are victorious. His death seals the moment in memory. Yet Marathon is not the end. It is only the beginning. Darius dies with the wound of defeat unhealed, and his son Xerxes inherits not only an empire, but a mission. He will succeed where his father failed. He will not merely punish Athens. He will bring all Greece under the Persian yoke. Xerxes is not a small man in history's memory. He is tall, commanding, resplendent in robes of state. His palaces gleam with riches, his court filled with attendants and scribes, with guards known as the Immortals, so named because their ranks never diminish, each fallen man replaced instantly, as if death itself cannot reduce their number. To the Greeks, Xerxes is less a man than an embodiment of vastness, of countless hands wielding countless spears. He looks westward with hunger, and the preparations for invasion begin. The gathering of Xerxes' army becomes legend. Herodotus, the historian, tells us of millions, numbers so large they seem like myth, a tide too great for earth itself to hold. Perhaps the truth is smaller, yet still immense. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, ships filling the sea. beasts of burden shaking the roads. The empire pours itself into motion as if all rivers and mountains, all valleys and deserts, are being drawn into one flood. Bridges of boats are lashed across the Hellespont, the narrow strait between Asia and Europe. When a storm destroys them, Xerxes commands that the waters be whipped and branded with chains, an act both of fury and of arrogance. The King of Kings dares to punish the sea. New bridges are built, and the great host begins to march westward. Imagine the sight. Dust rising like a veil across the horizon, countless hooves striking earth, banners from every land waving in the wind. From India come men with bows of cane. From Egypt, soldiers bearing shields of woven reed. From Babylon, men clad in scale armor. From Persia itself, ranks of infantry with wicker shields and short spears. Elephants march alongside horses. Supply trains stretch for miles. The earth trembles with their passage. To the Greeks, watching from afar, it seems less an army than a world on the move. Against such vastness, what can small city-states do? They are divided among themselves, suspicious of one another, quarreling as always. Athens and Sparta distrust each other's motives. Corinth and Thebes hesitate. Smaller states waver between resistance and surrender. Greece has never been one, only many. Yet, in the face of this looming shadow, whispers begin of unity. To stand alone is to be crushed. To stand together may yet offer hope. And so, the beginnings of resistance take shape, fragile as a flame in the wind. Xerxes himself commands the host, his throne carried wherever he goes, his court following with ceremony and splendor. He is both ruler and symbol, the embodiment of empire's will. To him, Greece is not a worthy foe, but a small, quarrelsome land to be swept aside. The Persian king cannot yet imagine that in narrow passes, in waters crowded with ships, the few can stand against the many. But Greece imagines it, not in certainty, not in arrogance, but in necessity. For if they do not imagine resistance, all is lost. In the streets of Sparta, the news of the Persian advance stirs the people. The laws of Lycurgus still govern them, binding them to discipline, to duty, to silence. They do not tremble easily, yet even Spartans know the scale of what comes. No training, no endurance can erase the simple truth. Against such numbers, survival seems impossible. And yet, impossibility has never been a reason for Spartans to falter. In Athens, Themistocles whispers of ships, triremes that may yet turn the sea into a weapon. He urges his city to build fleets, to trust not only in walls of stone but in walls of wood. His vision is mocked by some, but it will one day save Greece. And in the space between, in the councils of cities, words are sharpened like blades. Submit or resist, bend or stand. Each city must decide. The Persian shadow stretches longer with each passing season. From the plains of Anatolia to the waters of the Aegean, it creeps steadily westward, pressing upon the fragile freedoms of Greece. The messengers of earth and water have spoken, and their meaning lingers, chains or defiance. The choice cannot be delayed much longer. For Leonidas, watching from Sparta, this is no longer a distant story. The flood gathers, and when it comes, it will seek every gate, every pass, every shore. The unlikely king, once overshadowed, will soon find himself at the heart of history. The shadow stretches, vast and unyielding, across the Aegean, and in its lengthening darkness, the cities of Greece must look to one another with new eyes. For soon the call of the Hellene will sound, urging rivals to stand as brothers. The Greek world has never been one. It is a mosaic of city-states, each proud of its independence, each jealous of its customs, each convinced of its own way of life. Athens looks with suspicion upon Sparta's iron laws. Sparta, in turn, regards Athenian democracy as reckless chatter. Corinth tends its harbours, Thebes its fields, and each polis clings fiercely to its sovereignty. Yet across the Aegean the horizon darkens. Xerxes' armies stir the earth, and his fleets darken the sea. The Persian shadow, growing longer, presses against this fragile mosaic. No wall, no army, no city can resist alone. The Greeks begin to see that their isolation is a luxury they can no longer afford. It begins with whispers in council chambers. The Persians demand earth and water, but the greater demand is choice. Submit or resist. To resist requires not only courage but cooperation. And so envoys move from city to city, carrying words rather than swords. The call of the Hellene begins to take shape. At the heart of this fragile stirring lies Athens. The city has already felt the hand of Persia at Marathon, where its hoplites drove back Darius' host. That victory, though glorious, was not final. The Athenians know Persia will return, greater, fiercer, inexorable. One man more than any other sees the truth with clarity. Themistocles. Themistocles is not born into nobility. He is not of old families or aristocratic stock. His gift is vision, not lineage. Where others see the Persian menace as a storm far off, he hears it already rumbling in the mountains. His eyes turn not to the land, where Greek hoplites are strong, but to the sea, where Athens may yet build salvation. He speaks of triremes, swift, three-tiered warships, their oars cutting the water like knives, their bronze rams poised to pierce enemy hulls. He urges Athens to use its newfound wealth, silver from the mines at Laurion, not for temples or festivals, but for ships. His words are not easily accepted. Many distrust him. Many think of Persia as too vast to resist. But Themistocles is patient, persuasive, relentless. Slowly, he bends his city toward the sea. In Sparta, far away among the mountains of the Peloponnese, another response takes shape. Sparta is not a city of words but of silence and steel. Its kings, bound by law and custom, do not rule like Xerxes. Yet their authority carries weight. The Spartans have little love for Athens, but they too see that Persia will not spare them. Their pride forbids submission, and their training prepares them for sacrifice. The Spartan answer is different from the Athenian. Where Themistocles dreams of ships, Sparta speaks of men, of standing ground where ground can be held. Theirs is the discipline of the phalanx, the wall of shields, the silence before the clash. They cannot imagine bending, they can only imagine standing. Thus, the first threads of unity are woven. Athens looks to the sea, Sparta to the land. Together, perhaps, they can form a net strong enough to catch the flood. In the spring of 481 BCE, envoys gather in Corinth. It is not an easy meeting. Old grudges hang heavy in the air. The Corinthians remember Athenian arrogance. The Thebans hesitate, leaning toward Persia. Smaller cities wonder whether resistance is folly. Yet one by one, voices rise. The envoys speak of freedom, of the Greek way of life, of gods who dwell upon Olympus and demand courage from their children. The gathering is called the Hellenic League. Not all join, but enough do to form a fragile cord. They swear oaths to resist Persia, to put aside quarrels, to fight together. It is a unity born not of love, but of necessity. A bond hammered in fear, yet glimmering with resolve. Still, unity does not erase division. Each city dreams of its own glory. Each still mistrusts the other. But in the face of Persia, These rivalries are set aside, if only for a time. The call of the Hellenes is not a song of harmony but a chorus of many voices singing the same refrain. We will not bow. Themistocles moves swiftly. He urges Athens to complete its fleet, to build hundreds of triremes. He imagines not only holding the sea, but using it to strike. He whispers of straits and narrow waters, where Persian numbers mean nothing, where cunning can outwit might. His mind is already sailing toward Salamis, though the battle lies still in the future. In Sparta, preparations take another form. Leonidas, the quiet king, listens as plans unfold. He knows that Persia's host is too great to be faced in open plains. The defense must be shaped by terrain, by narrow passes where numbers count for little, where courage counts for all. His thoughts drift toward Thermopylae, the hot gates where mountains press upon sea and leave only a sliver of land to pass. There, perhaps, a handful of men can hold against an empire. The councils end, the oaths are sworn, the plans begin to breathe. Across Greece, men sharpen spears and train in dusty fields. Ships take shape in Athenian harbours, their hulls rising like skeletal ribs of the future. The sound of hammers rings against wood, the smell of pitch thickens the air, and the sea waits restless and eternal. And yet, for all the preparations, fear lingers. Every man knows the scale of what approaches. The Persian host is not rumour but reality, moving ever closer, crossing bridges of boats, filling valleys with dust, shaking the earth with hooves. Against such a tide, the unity of Greece seems fragile, tentative, a reed in the flood. But even reeds can sway without breaking. It is not only weapons that are prepared, but words. Priests seek omens, sacrifices are offered, questions asked of oracles. At Delphi, the Pythia speaks in riddles, warning Athens that only wooden walls will save her. Some interpret this as the city's palisades, but Themistocles insists it means ships. His voice carries weight, and Athens places its trust in the sea. For the Spartans, prophecy also guides. The oracle warns that either Sparta will be destroyed or one of her kings must fall. Leonidas hears the words without flinching. In his silence, the seed of destiny takes root. Thus, slowly, painfully, the Greeks take shape as one. Not a nation, not an empire, but a league. Fragile as glass, precious as breath. The call of the Hellenes is not shouted, but whispered. Yet in that whisper lies defiance, a murmur strong enough to echo against the roar of Persia. Athens and Sparta, two poles of Greece, stand now not as enemies but as uneasy allies. One turns to the sea, the other to the land. Between them lies a chance, slim, fragile, but real. History moves on soft feet. It does not rush. It lingers in these councils, in these oaths, in these choices made by men who cannot yet see the shape of the future. But the choices matter. Without them, the battles to come would never be fought. Without them, Greece would already be lost. For now, there is unity, however thin. For now, there is hope. And hope, in the face of shadows, is enough to keep the flame alive. The flame flickers but does not die, and in its glow Athens and Sparta glimpse one another not as rivals, but as partners in survival. Soon, their uneasy alliance will be tested in the narrow pass of Thermopylae, where the flood of Persia meets the wall of men. In the hush of Sparta, where the streets are lined not with marble, but with the rhythm of marching feet, destiny waits in quiet turns. It does not always choose the brightest flame, nor the most resounding voice. Often, it seeks the one who can endure, who can carry weight without flinching, who can remain unbroken when others would bend. So it is with Leonidas. He is not the eldest son, nor the heir long expected. His brothers hold that promise first. Cleomenes, sharp and cunning, rules with a restless spirit, his eyes flashing with schemes that run deeper than the Eurotas river. Dorieus, stronger in body, hungers for glory, seeking conquest beyond the Peloponnesian hills. Leonidas watches them both, not with envy but with the patience of one who knows that fate often surprises. Sparta is no place for crowns of splendor. Its kings live not in gilded halls but in the same stern air as their people. Two thrones stand side by side in the city, for Sparta has always known that power, left unchecked, can grow unruly. The dual kingship is both balance and burden, a reminder that even the highest are bound by law. When Cleomenes burns with ambition, when Dorieus leaves for distant shores and never returns, the path clears not by design but by the quiet erosion of chance. Leonidas, who has not sought rule, finds it pressing gently upon his shoulders. The weight is heavy, yet it does not crush him. Instead, it settles like armor long prepared. He becomes king not by loud proclamation, but by inevitability. The Ephors, those silent guardians of Spartan law, see in him not brilliance but steadiness. And Sparta, forged in the fires of discipline, has always valued the stone that holds firm more than the flame that dazzles and dies. Leonidas accepts the crown as one might accept a shield handed before battle, not as treasure, but as obligation. His kingship is not the soaring flight of ambition, but the measured tread of duty. He knows, perhaps more than any, that the life of a Spartan king is not one of luxury, but of constant watchfulness. For the king eats last, speaks last, and dies first. The city around him breathes in silence. The agoge has taught its boys to endure hunger, to sleep upon reeds, to answer with few words. It has also taught them to follow, to obey, to place the polis before the self. In this, Leonidas is no different. His rule is not above the people but among them. He walks the streets with the same measured pace, his cloak no richer than that of other men, his meals no finer. But within him lies the quiet gravity of a man who understands that he no longer lives for himself alone. Every decision now ripples outward, to the warriors who sharpen their spears, to the mothers who watch their sons leave for war, to the helots who labour in the fields, and to the allies beyond Laconia who look to Sparta with wary eyes. There is little ceremony in his rise. No golden diadem rests upon his head, no trumpet resounds. Instead, there is the murmur of acknowledgement, the bow of heads in assembly, the oath sworn to uphold the laws of Lycurgus. It is enough, for in Sparta, greatness is not adorned but endured. And yet, even here, the shadow of Persia grows longer. To the east, Xerxes inherits the vast throne of Darius. Whispers reach Greece of preparations, of bridges stretched across seas, of armies that swallow the horizon. A king in Sparta cannot ignore the rumble of such tides. Leonidas listens. He watches. He measures not only the strength of his people, but the measure of his own heart. He knows what it means to wear this crown. It is a summons to stand between danger and home, to hold the pass when retreat would be easier, to give meaning to the lives of others by risking one's own. Some say he is unremarkable compared to other kings, not dazzling like Alexander will one day be, not cunning like Themistocles in Athens, not wild like his brother Cleomenes. But perhaps this is his gift. He is steady, immovable, a rock in the storm. Where others might weave schemes or chase glory, Leonidas prepares to endure. At night, In the dim light of the hearth, he sits in thought. The flicker of flame catches in his eyes, yet his face remains calm. He thinks of his wife, Gorgo, wise and sharp-tongued, who speaks truth without fear. He thinks of his children, who play under the same strict gaze that once shaped him. He thinks of the city itself, this Sparta that asks so much and gives so little comfort in return. And he does not resent it, for in his marrow, Leonidas understands to be Spartan is not to seek ease, but to embrace weight. To rule here is to accept that the crown is made not of gold but of iron, hammered by discipline and polished by sacrifice. In time, his people will come to see him not as the most brilliant of their kings, but as the most steadfast. He does not dazzle, but he endures. And in endurance, there is a different kind of greatness. The kind that waits for the appointed hour and does not falter when it comes. Already, that hour begins to stir. The earth trembles with the march of Persian feet. The sea churns with their ships. The horizon darkens with their banners. Greece turns restless, and whispers of resistance begin to curl like smoke. Leonidas feels the weight of the crown, and with it, the quiet certainty that his life will not end in old age. A Spartan king knows this truth from the first day he sits upon the throne. Death walks near the diadem. To reign is to prepare, always for the final summons, yet he does not shrink. He walks forward as he always has. Steady, silent, unflinching. The crown rests upon him as the shield rests upon his arm. Neither is ornament. Both are burden, both are destiny. In the stillness of Sparta, Leonidas wears his crown not as triumph, but as duty, not as privilege, but as preparation. Beyond the horizon, the drums of Persia grow louder, and soon the march of Xerxes will shake the earth. The east stirs. Beyond the Aegean, past the edge of Greek sight, the great heart of Persia beats with restless power. From the royal city of Susa, messengers ride like arrows across the empire, summoning men from every corner of the known world. The call goes out, and the nations answer. For Xerxes, son of Darius, has lifted his gaze westward, and he desires the conquest of Greece not merely for revenge, but for empire's completion. The Persians do not think in small scales. Their empire stretches like a vast tapestry, woven with threads from distant lands, from the banks of the Indus to the highlands of Lydia, from the deserts of Egypt to the forests of Thrace. All fall under the shadow of the great king. His word carries further than the cry of any herald. When he commands, the earth itself seems to lean in obedience. Xerxes inherits this power after the death of his father. Darius had sought to break the Greeks, but had faltered at Marathon, where the Athenian hoplites cut through his army like wind through dry grass. That humiliation lingers like smoke upon Persian pride. Xerxes cannot let it stand. His rule begins with a vow to avenge, to surpass, to place the Greek lands under the yoke of Persia once and for all. And so the preparations begin. They are said to last for years, for the weight of this undertaking is unlike any before. Armies are drawn not only from the Persian heartland, but from the farthest edges of empire. Herodotus, in his wide-eyed telling, speaks of millions, of numbers so vast they stagger belief. He describes multitudes of men, of ships covering the sea, of beasts of burden crowding the earth. Modern truth whispers more modest figures, yet even so, the scale remains beyond anything Greece has ever faced. For the Persians, this is not merely war. It is a river in flood, a surge of empire flowing westward, meant to drown all resistance beneath its tide. From Bactria, Horsemen arrive with their tall bows and flowing trousers. From Egypt, chariots roll, painted with symbols of gods older than even Persia remembers. From Babylon come men hardened by ancient walls, their shields heavy with history. Ethiopians march with spears tipped in stone, their skin dark against the blazing sun. Medes and Scythians, Cappadocians and Cilicians, Phrygians and Armenians. The roll call is endless. Every land conquered by Cyrus, Cambyses, and Darius now empties its strength into the service of Xerxes. The great king himself is not hurried. He moves with the deliberate majesty of one who knows that all things will bend in time. His throne rests on gilded platforms, carried by servants, a mobile palace amid the sea of men. Wherever he turns, courtiers and guards attend him, the immortals shimmering like a wall of bronze and silk. The land groans under this march. Villages tremble as soldiers pass. Grain is consumed in mountains, rivers drunk dry. Herds are slaughtered for food, forests cut for fire. The army is both organism and storm, alive in its hunger, destructive in its need. To see it approach is to see the horizon swallowed. At the Hellespont, Xerxes halts, for here lies the narrow strait separating Asia from Europe, the sea that must be crossed if Greece is to be reached. He commands that bridges of boats be built, stretching from one continent to the other like threads binding the world. Hundreds of ships are lashed together, anchored with cables of flax and papyrus. Upon them, planks and earth are laid, so that men, horses, and chariots might cross. The first attempt fails. A storm rises and shatters the bridges, tearing the cables, scattering the ships. Xerxes, in a rage that legend remembers vividly, orders the sea itself punished. Whips are brought, and the waters are struck. Chains are lowered into the surf, as if to bind the rebellious waves. It is a gesture both symbolic and strange, yet it reveals the heart of empire, a belief that even nature must bend to the great king's will. Undaunted, the engineers build again. This time the bridges hold. When they are finished, Xerxes stands to watch the passage of his army, and the crossing begins. It is said that for days, the men march without pause, flowing across the strait like ants across a log. Hooves, wheels, and footsteps thunder upon the boards. The air fills with the dust of countless lives moving as one. At the same time, fleets gather upon the sea. The Persian navy, drawn from Phoenician harbours and Ionian ports, stretches in vast lines across the waters. Its sails catch the wind like the wings of 1,000 birds. The sea itself seems transformed into a mirror of empire, reflecting its unending reach. In the west, whispers of this host reach Greece. Traders speak of endless numbers, of ships without horizon, of armies that drink rivers dry. The Greeks, divided by quarrels, struggle to believe. How can so small a land withstand such immensity? Some counsel submission, to send earth and water as tokens of surrender. Others speak of flight, of abandoning the coasts for the mountains. Yet among them, voices of defiance rise, voices that insist freedom is dearer than life. But even defiance trembles before the image of such power. For Xerxes does not march like a man. He marches like inevitability. The journey continues north and west. Macedonia bends before him, compelled into alliance. Thrace is crossed like a stepping stone. The roads are carved by engineers, rivers bridged, mountains cut into. Nothing is allowed to resist the flood. Behind Xerxes, the land lies stripped and exhausted. Before him, the land braces in dread. And yet, beneath the grandeur of numbers, there is always fragility. The greater the host, the greater its hunger. The larger the fleet, the more it fears storms. Xerxes commands with majesty, but he also carries the weight of hubris, that subtle poison which seeps into all empires. For in believing himself master of the world, he begins to forget the stubbornness of small nations, the resilience of free men. Still, in this moment, the tide feels unstoppable. The roads of Greece seem already under his feet. His generals speak of swift conquest, of Athens humbled, of Sparta broken, of temples burned and treasures seized. For what is Greece? A scatter of city-states before the ocean of Persia. The answer waits yet unspoken, hidden in the narrow paths of mountain passes, in the fragile unity of divided rivals, in the hearts of men who value their freedom more than their lives. For now, Greece trembles. From the towers of Athens, watchers scan the sea, straining their eyes against reports of fleets beyond number. From the valleys of Sparta, warriors tighten their grips on spears, hearing rumors of earth-shaking armies. Across the isles and hills, whispers run like wildfire. Xerxes is coming. The march of the great king is both sound and silence. The sound of drums, hooves, and war cries, and the silence of dread that falls upon those who wait. To witness it is to see history moving like a tide, relentless, heavy, and vast. And still it comes on, step after step, sail after sail, a procession of empire that seems without end. Across the mountains and seas, the flood of Persia moves westward, unstoppable in its weight. And in Greece, the leaders gather to ask where, if anywhere, such a tide might be held. Soon, the choice of the pass will be made, the choosing of the gates. The tide has turned toward Greece. Xerxes marches, his army stretching like shadow over the earth, his fleet mirroring the sky with sails that blot the horizon. In the cities of Hellas, the news arrives like tremors before an earthquake. The Persian flood cannot be outrun forever. It must be faced. But where? To choose the place of resistance is not only a question of strategy, it is a question of destiny. In Athens, voices clash like swords. Themistocles, sharp as flint, urges the building of ships, his mind seeing victory not on the plains but upon the restless sea. Others argue for fortresses, for the safety of walls and the comfort of stone, yet walls are only as strong as the hearts that defend them. In Sparta, the debate is quieter but heavier, for Sparta's law demands duty. The ephors and the gerousia, the elders of the state, listen with the stillness of carved figures, weighing each word like iron. Their city is land-bound, their soldiers trained for ground that is narrow, ordered, and clear. They know that to fight Persia in open plain is to invite annihilation. But somewhere, perhaps, geography may lend its hand. A place where terrain itself becomes ally. Whispers grow of Thermopylae. The name means hot gates, for there, from the earth, springs rise in steaming pools, the breath of the mountain exhaling through fissures in stone. But more than its name, its shape calls to the strategists. A narrow pass, pressed between the cliffs of Mount Kalitromos and the edge of the Malian Gulf. At points, the road is so tight that two wagons cannot pass abreast. Here numbers lose their meaning. Here, a handful of men may hold against an ocean. To speak of Thermopylae is to speak of paradox. It is both gateway and barrier, both opening and trap. Through it flows the road to central Greece, to Boeotia, to Attica, and to the Peloponnese beyond. To surrender it is to invite Persia into the very heart of Hellas. To hold it, even for a time, is to make the mountains themselves allies of the free. The decision is not simple. There are doubts, Some fear that to resist Xerxes at all is to court certain destruction. Others wonder if the unity of the Greeks, fragile as spun glass, can endure the strain of such a stand. Yet the urgency of Persia's advance presses the question forward. The allies gather at Corinth. Delegates come from Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and smaller cities that cling to independence like vines to rock. The hall is filled with voices, thick with the weight of old rivalries, for Greece is not one nation, but many, proud, quarrelsome, jealous of honor. To unite is unnatural, and yet necessity forces it. Arguments rise. Should they guard Thessaly broad and open before the enemy descends further south? Some urge it, but the plains there are too wide, too exposed. The Persian cavalry would sweep across it like a sigh through grain. Should they withdraw deeper, to the Isthmus of Corinth, fortify the narrow land bridge to the Peloponnese, and let northern Greece fall? To some, this seems prudent. Yet to others, it feels like betrayal, abandoning cities, abandoning people, surrendering without fight. Thermopylae remains, a place where courage can amplify numbers, where strategy can meet brute force. And so, the choice is made. Thermopylae will be the gate they guard. But gates cannot hold without men. The question lingers, who will stand there? Leonidas listens. He sits among the Spartan delegation, his voice quiet yet steady. He does not promise victory. He does not deceive himself or others about the scale of the task. But he sees the truth woven into the choice, that sometimes to delay is to defeat and to resist is to inspire. He volunteers. In his decision lies a strange mixture of acceptance and resolve. He knows, even now, that the past may be his grave. He knows that to stand at Thermopylae is to offer not survival, but sacrifice. Yet he does not hesitate. His kingship is not crown and comfort, but shield and burden. To lead is to step where others falter, to walk into the narrow place where death waits. The council listens to him. Perhaps they sense in his words the weight of something more than strategy. Perhaps they see in him the calm of a man who does not fear what lies ahead. Whatever they perceive, they do not stop him. The road to Thermopylae becomes his to walk. Still, even as the choice is made, preparations must follow. Messengers ride through the cities, calling for arms, summoning allies. Phocians, who live near the pass, pledge to guard the mountain paths. Thespians, small but brave, promise to send their men. Other cities waver, torn by fear, yet some still answer. Meanwhile at Delphi the oracle speaks. To the Athenians she warns that only wooden walls will save them. Words Themistocles interprets as ships. To the Spartans she declares that either their city will fall, or one of their kings must die. Such riddles weigh upon all who hear them. Yet Leonidas, when told, does not recoil. He receives the words as though they confirm what he already knows, that his life is no longer his own. Thermopylae. The name spreads through Greece, a whisper, a promise, a dread. Mothers hear it as they prepare their sons for war. Farmers hear it as they lay down ploughs to take up spears. Sailors hear it as they look toward the straits where fleets may clash. All know that soon, at the hot gates, fate will burn. The place itself waits in silence. The cliffs rise, harsh and narrow, as if the earth itself has closed its fist. The hot springs bubble, steaming into the air, carrying the scent of sulphur. The sea laps at the narrow road, restless, eternal. For centuries, travelers have passed this way, some pausing to bathe, others hurrying through. But now the pass prepares for something different. It will no longer be merely a road. It will be an altar. Leonidas returns to Sparta to choose his men. He does not call for the young, who might leave no children behind. Instead, he summons those who already have sons, men whose bloodlines will endure even if they fall. This choice is deliberate, quiet, and deeply Spartan. It is not doom he selects, but continuity. In the coming days, their names will be known, their number counted. 300 each stepping forward to join their king, each understanding, without words, what the journey means. But that is yet to unfold. For now, the choice has been made. The gates will be defended. And in that choice lies a fragile hope that courage may buy time, that sacrifice may kindle unity, that history may pause long enough for Greece to ready itself. The hot gates stand waiting, narrow and silent, their springs whispering steam into the air. Soon Leonidas will gather his 300 and lead them there, not to glory, but to stand. The decision rests upon Leonidas. It is not the weight of a crown alone, nor the burden of command, but the subtle, haunting responsibility of choosing who shall walk with him toward death. The call has gone out. Sparta must send men to stand at the pass of Thermopylae. Other Greeks will join, but the heart of the defense must be Spartan. For who else leaves as if already rehearsing death? Leonidas, in the silence of his chamber, knows what he must do. The laws of Sparta breathe through him as though they are older than flesh and bone. This stand cannot be made with youthful fire alone, for Sparta cannot risk the cutting off of its lineage. To take the young, the childless, would be to gamble with the very roots of the city. So Leonidas chooses not those who burn brightest, but those who already cast shadows in the next generation. Men with sons, men whose names will not vanish even if their bodies do. The number is set, 300, a small band to the eyes of Persia, an ocean of spears advancing from Asia, but to Leonidas it is the perfect measure. Not a grand army, but a symbol. Not enough to defeat Xerxes, but enough to defy him. 300 lives, balanced upon the scale of history. One by one, the men are summoned. In the cool courtyards of Sparta, where stone walls echo with the rhythm of marching feet, names are called. Each man, when chosen, nods as though affirming what he already knew deep within himself. They had been preparing for this moment, not for days or months, but for the entirety of their lives. Their training, their scars, their silence in pain, all point toward this call. But there is another ritual unfolding, quieter, deeper, the farewells. Spartan women are not veiled in softness. They do not weep openly at the departure of their husbands or sons. Instead, they speak the words that are carved into the marrow of Sparta: return with your shield or on it. It is not cruelty, but clarity. The shield is not a man's own protection. It protects the line, the brother beside him. To lose it is to betray not only self, but city. Thus, a Spartan must either carry it home victorious or be carried upon it dead yet unbroken. In this way, the leave-takings are less of sorrow, more of stern pride. A wife adjusts the crest of her husband's helmet. A mother places her hand upon her son's shoulder, steady as granite. A child tugs at his father's cloak, not fully understanding, yet sensing the gravity that surrounds him like the shadow of an eclipse. Leonidas moves among them, speaking little. He is king, yet he is also brother, comrade, father. He knows the faces of these men. He has trained with them, bled beside them, shared meals in the mess halls of Sparta where even kings eat the same black broth as common soldiers. There is no division here. If anything, his choice to join them, to walk towards certain death when he could have stood apart, binds them closer than law or command. The 300 gather in the training ground, their shields flashing in the afternoon light. The bronze seems to glow like captured sunlight, each shield round as a world. They test their formation, locking shields shoulder to shoulder. A wall of men become one. The clatter of spears upon shields rises in unison, not a sound of aggression, but of harmony. A single voice made from 300 hearts. It is not just the chosen who feel the weight of this march. All of Sparta watches. The old lean on their staffs, eyes narrowed against both pride and sorrow. The unchosen younger men burn with the ache of being left behind, yearning to prove themselves. Yet understanding the wisdom of Leonidas's decree, the women stand tall, their gazes fierce, as though lending strength from the hearth to the battlefield that awaits. This departure is no hurried scramble. It is a procession. The road north stretches long, but the march begins with solemn dignity. 300 shields glint in the sunlight, 300 crimson cloaks flutter in the breeze like living flames. Each step is steady, measured as if the earth itself is counting their passage. The sound of their march is not thunderous. It is quiet, deliberate. Yet in that quiet is a message: we are not many, but we are enough. Enough to hold the gates, enough to buy time, enough to show the world what courage looks like when it is stripped bare of hope. Stories ripple outward even before they reach the pass. Other Greeks hear of Leonidas's choice, of the 300 marching as if toward their own funeral, and their hearts stir. Some will join, bringing their smaller contingents, swelling the numbers. Yet none will carry the weight of symbol as the Spartans do. They are the heart, the immovable stone placed in the path of a flood. As they march, Leonidas walks not at the head, but among them. He speaks in low tones to those beside him, listens more than he commands. His presence is both anchor and fire. He does not promise survival nor victory, only meaning. To stand at the narrow pass is to buy Greece time, to show Persia that even kings and empires may be delayed by the resolve of a few. Night falls along the march, and campfires glow like stars scattered upon the earth. Around them, men share simple meals, sharpen their spears, and sit in silence, each lost in thought. Some whisper prayers to gods who have watched over Sparta since its founding. Others carve small tokens for their children to be carried home if they do not return. The air is thick with both mortality and immortality, for they sense they are walking into a story that will outlive them. Herodotus would later write of them, but in this moment they are only men. Men who laugh softly at shared memories, men who close their eyes and see the faces of wives, sons, mothers. Men who feel the tremor of fear and master it, not by denying it, but by binding it within discipline. Leonidas, looking at them by firelight, feels the paradox of kingship. He is the leader, yet he is also a participant in their fate. He has chosen them, but he has also chosen himself. His crown is no shield against what comes. If anything, it is a heavier chain, one he wears without complaint. As dawn approaches, the column moves on, the landscape shifting around them. Fields give way to mountains, valleys to narrow passes. Each step brings them closer to Thermopylae, the place where sea and cliff conspire to squeeze the world into a corridor of destiny. The hot gates. The Greeks call it so because of the steaming springs that bubble from the earth, carrying the scent of sulfur But to the Spartans, it will be remembered not for water or rock, but for fire. The fire of resistance, of sacrifice, of standing when standing seems impossible. The march is not just physical, it is spiritual. Each mile strips away what is unnecessary. The 300 become less men of flesh and more of symbol, more of myth. Yet within themselves they remain fully human, aware of the nearness of death, aware of the slender thread upon which their lives hang. This awareness does not weaken them. It steels them, and so they approach the gates. They do not know exactly when the Persians will come, nor in what number. Only that they will come, like the sea crashing against rock. Yet the 300 do not flinch. They march as though toward a temple where the offering is their own lives. In this choice, in this march, Sparta itself is revealed, not merely as a city of warriors, but as a people who believe that to die well is greater than to live without honor. The 300 walk into history not as conquerors, but as guardians of a past, of an idea, of time itself. And as their shields glint beneath the rising sun, a question lingers. How long can so few hold against so many when the tide of Persia presses ever closer? The road to Thermopylae is narrow, twisting through cliffs and mountains, where the very earth seems to fold in upon itself. Travellers long before Leonidas had known these paths, feeling the sea winds pressing against their faces as the mountain walls closed in. But never before has this pass held such weight, such breathless expectation as in the late summer of 480 BCE. The Spartans are not alone. From across Greece, men have come. Not enough to match the flood gathering under Xerxes, but enough to give shape to resistance. They come in trickles at first, a company from Thespeae, proud in their loyalty, men of Phocis, hardened by the roughness of mountain living, others from neighbouring Polius, who see in this narrow place the last chance to hold back what feels like the tide of the world itself. Each carries more than a spear. Each carries the burden of a city's hope. The air at Thermopylae holds its own strangeness. The hot springs that give the pass its name bubble and steam, leaving the scent of sulphur hanging low, as if the gods themselves breathe warnings through the mist. Warriors sharpen blades with this scent in their nostrils, and it clings to their garments like a reminder of mortality. To fight here is to stand at the very hinge of life and death, and the smell of the earth itself will not let them forget it. Leonidas moves among them quietly. He does not stand apart, crowned or cloaked in superiority. He speaks little, and when he does, his words are plain, unadorned, like stones set into a wall. A Spartan king is not a monarch in the sense of Persia's glittering rulers. He is the first among equals, bound by the same laws, judged by the same standards, mortal in the same ways. Leonidas' presence reassures, not because he promises victory, but because he shows no fear of sharing in what is to come. The men watch him as they prepare. There is a rhythm to the sharpening of spears, to the careful polish of shields. Bronze catches the light of the sinking sun, glowing amber, as if the equipment itself carries some inner fire. Shields are more than wood and bronze. They are the wall of Greece, the promise that no man fights alone. Each one polished is not for vanity, but for recognition, a reflection of the man who carries it and the comrades who depend upon him. The Thespians, though fewer in number, are steadfast. Their leader, Thermopylae, stands beside Leonidas, not seeking the shadow of glory, but content to stand shoulder to shoulder. They know well that their decision to remain will cost them dearly, perhaps everything, yet they do not shrink back. For them, as for the Spartans, the question is not survival, but meaning. To turn away would be to live emptied, to stay is to die fulfilled. The Phocians, too, stand ready, though their role is different. They are mountain men, guardians of the paths above Thermopylae. It will be their task to hold the hidden way, to keep the Persians from outflanking the pass. They know the terrain better than any. Yet there lingers a shadow of unease, for the mountain paths are many, and the temptation of betrayal always follows when empires spread their gold. Still, they take their places, and their presence is a reassurance. Greece does not yield its land without struggle. Campfires glow as dusk settles. Sparks rise into the darkening sky, joining the first stars. Men eat sparingly. Bread, olives, figs, a little wine to soften the hunger. They sit in circles, speaking softly, not of glory, but of families left behind, of sons too young to fight, of wives who will wait and wonder. The air is thick with memory as much as with sulphur. Each man carries within him a village, a mother's voice, a child's laughter. And yet here they sit, bound together by something larger than any private love, the fragile, flickering flame of freedom. Leonidas does not need to remind them why they have come. The Persians march like a storm, their numbers uncountable, their resources inexhaustible. Already tales ripple through the ranks, bridges of ships stretched across the Hellespont, roads clogged with armies, cavalry kicking up dust that blots out the horizon. The Greeks do not deny these stories. They accept them, breathe them in like the sulphur. What matters is not the size of the enemy, but the narrowness of the gates, the resolve of those who guard them. On the second night, scouts return with news. Xerxes' forces are close. The earth trembles faintly beneath their advance. Horses, wagons, and endless feet drum upon the soil. Even the sea seems to churn more restlessly, as if disturbed by the vast weight pressing westward. In the camp, men listen in silence. The nearness of the storm does not scatter them, it steals them. To be gathered here is to accept what comes, without illusion. The unity of Greece is fragile, yet real in this place. Athenians are not here. Their part is yet to come, upon the waters, but their absence does not divide the allies. Instead, the sight of so many cities represented, however small their numbers, carries weight. It is as if Greece herself, usually fractured by rivalry and pride, has drawn together into this narrow throat of land. Thermopylae is more than a pass. It is a mirror, reflecting back the soul of a people who would rather die standing than leave on their knees. The days pass in preparation. Spears are tested, armor inspected, drills repeated until muscle itself remembers the motions. Spartans train not with noise, but with silence, their discipline unnerving to those unaccustomed to it. They move as one body, their shields overlapping, their steps measured. The allies watch, learn, and take heart. For in that silence lies a kind of invincibility, not of body, but of spirit. Leonidas often walks alone at twilight, gazing at the narrow strip where mountain meets sea. He does not need prophecy to know the outcome. He sees the faces of his men. He hears the distant thunder of Persia's advance, and he understands the balance. Yet he carries no despair. Death has always been near for a Spartan. What matters is not how long one leaves, but how firmly one stands. And so the gathering at Thermopylae becomes more than military preparation. It becomes a vigil. Men keep watch not only against the enemy, but against their own fear. They remind one another in quiet words, in gestures, in the shared weight of shield and spear, that they are not alone. When dawn comes, the camp stirs to the sound of gulls crying above the sea, to the bubbling of the springs, to the slow creak of leather straps as men lift their armor once more. The Persians are near, close enough now that their campfires glow faintly against the horizon at night. Soon the waiting will end. But in these hours, there is a stillness, a fragile peace. For here, at the edge of the known world, Greeks from scattered cities gather not as rivals, but as brothers. They have come to Thermopylae not because they expect to live, but because they refuse to kneel. And Leonidas, moving quietly among them, knows the weight of their choice. He feels it in the sulphur-scented air, in the gaze of every man who lifts a shield, in the silence that binds them more strongly than chains. He does not speak of victory. He does not promise what he cannot give. He simply stands with them, and by that standing gives them all they need. The hot gates wait. The storm approaches. The gathering is complete. The men have taken their places, their hearts bound in silence and resolve. Beyond the horizon, the enemy stirs, and soon the first wave will break upon the shields. Dawn drapes itself across the mountains, spilling pale gold upon the narrow pass. The sea breathes heavily at the edge of Thermopylae, its tide restless, as though echoing the anticipation of men who have not yet raised their spears. Mist curls upward from the hot springs, the sulphur scent sharper now, as if the earth itself braces for what is to come. On the Persian side, the world awakens differently. The sound is not of gulls or bubbling waters, but of countless hooves, boots, and voices. The horizon stirs like a living tide, banners snapping, armor glinting in the rising sun. It is not one army, but many nations bound together under Xerxes' command. To the Greeks, the sight is overwhelming, a reminder of the impossible odds that stretch against them. Yet to Leonidas and his chosen few, the immensity of that flood means little. They stand where the mountains narrow into stone corridors, where numbers cannot swell into advantage. The field is not open but channeled. The first wave comes with morning light. The Medes, fierce in appearance, stride forward with confidence. They are veterans of empire, men accustomed to victory. To them, these Greeks are but an inconvenience, a thorn on the way to Athens, a handful of stubborn defenders who will scatter at the first blow. They advance shouting, spears raised high, believing their momentum enough to break resistance, and then they meet the wall. The Spartans do not shout. They do not rush. They hold their ground, shields locked so tightly the line becomes a single body of bronze and wood. At Leonidas' signal, they lean forward, spears bristling like the quills of an unyielding creature. The Medes crash against this barrier, and the sound is thunderous, the clash of iron on bronze, the cries of men pressed into battle. Yet the line holds. The narrow ground betrays the Persians. Their numbers, once overwhelming, are now compressed, their ranks stumbling over one another. Step by step, the Spartans move in rhythm. They push forward, not wildly but deliberately, every movement drilled into their bones since childhood. When one spear breaks, another is lifted. When one man tires, another steps in. The Medes, unprepared for such precision, falter. For the first time, they taste the possibility of failure. As the sun climbs higher, the Medes fall back. The pass is littered with their dead. The Greeks do not pursue in wild triumph. They simply return to formation, shields aligned, breathing steady. They know this is only the beginning. Xerxes watches from a distance, surprised and displeased. His commanders urge another attempt. He sends the Scythians next, a different people from within his vast dominion, perhaps believing variety will succeed where the Medes faltered. They surge forward, filling the narrow pass with another wave of spears and arrows. Again, they meet the wall. Again, the Spartans absorb the blow, their discipline unbroken, their silence more terrifying than any battle cry. To fight men who shout and rage is one thing. To fight men who fight as though death itself is irrelevant is another. The hours stretch. Dust rises. Blood stains the stones, mingling with the steaming waters of the springs. Still the Greeks hold. Still the Persians fall. At last, Xerxes grows impatient. Enough of lesser troops. He calls upon his immortals, the elite guard. The men whose number is said to never diminish. For each fallen is immediately replaced, preserving their 1,000 as eternal. Their armor gleams, their confidence unshaken. They are the pride of Persia, the shadow of inevitability. The Greeks, however, are not cowed. When the immortals advance, Leonidas gives no speeches, no fiery exhortations. His men know their task. They lower their spears once more, settle behind their shields, and wait. The clash is immense. The immortals strike with precision, their reputation carrying with it the weight of fear. Yet the narrowness of the gates strips them of advantage. The Spartans rotate their line, fresh men replacing the weary, shields overlapping with perfect synchronization. Each thrust is measured, each push deliberate. The immortals, for all their might, cannot break through. Herodotus would later write of this moment with awe, that the Greeks fought as though each man were guided by the same hand, their silence unnerving, their rhythm unbroken. The Persians, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer size, find themselves confined, crushed by the very numbers that once empowered them. The immortals lose their illusion of eternity, their bodies falling upon the stones like any other. By afternoon, the pass is thick with corpses. The Persians retreat and beaten back once more, and in the narrow quiet that follows, the Greeks breathe deeply of the sulphur air, tasting both exhaustion and triumph. For the first time, it seems possible that the tide of empire can be held, that courage may balance against countless hosts. Hope flickers among the allies. The Thespians look to one another with fierce pride. The Phocians, guarding the mountain path, feel steadied by the strength below. Even those who doubted begin to wonder if history itself is shifting. Perhaps, they whisper, the gods favor them. Perhaps the impossible is not so impossible after all. But Leonidas does not indulge in such illusions. He knows Persia's strength is far from spent. He knows these first assaults are tests, probes, not the full weight of the storm. His men, though victorious, are not untouched. Arms ache, shields bear dents, spears splinter. Each small wound, each frayed edge, is a reminder that no wall stands forever. Still, he does not speak of this aloud. He lets the men savor their moment, for moments are all they may have. As night falls, the fires of both camps burn against the darkness. From the Persian side, the glow stretches endlessly, a sea of flame upon the horizon. From the Greek side, the fires are few, modest, almost fragile. Yet there is a steadiness in them, as though each flame carries the resolve of an entire people. The men eat sparingly once more, sharpening what weapons remain, binding wounds with strips of cloth. The sulfur smoke drifts over them like a shroud, but no one complains. Among the Spartans, silence remains the rule. No songs, no boasting, no shouts of triumph. Only the quiet scrape of whetstone on steel, the muted murmur of prayer. Their discipline is not merely a tactic. It is a way of being, a way of facing the enormity of what surrounds them without flinching. Leonidas walks among them, as he did before. He places a hand on a soldier's shoulder, exchanges a brief glance, no words. He does not need to speak. His presence itself is language enough. The men draw strength from him as he draws strength from them. In the Persian camp, however, there is unrest. The failure of the Medes, the Scythians, and even the Immortals weighs heavily. Xerxes is said to lash out in anger, unable to fathom how so few can resist so many. Yet, for all his fury, the truth remains: the pass is unbroken. So the first day ends with a paradox. The greatest empire in the world has struck with its pride and strength, and has been repelled. A band of Greeks, outnumbered beyond measure, still stands. Hope, fragile but real, flickers in the darkness. But hope is a dangerous thing. It can swell into confidence, blind to betrayal lurking in shadows. For even as the Greeks savor their moment, another path coils through the mountains above. A path known to a single man whose whisper will soon turn the tide. The shields hold, the spears stand firm, and for one luminous day the tide of empire breaks upon the stones. Yet, even as courage blooms, a quieter shadow stirs, for not all battles are won with steel. In the hush of night, betrayal begins to breathe. Night has fallen over Thermopylae. The fires of the Greek camp glow softly against the mountain walls, while the sea hums its endless song at the pass's edge. For a time, the stillness is almost tender, as though the world itself pauses to honor the courage of the day just past. The men sleep in turns, their shields stacked close, their spears beside them. The smell of sulfur drifts again across the stones, a bitter incense of the earth. Yet in another camp, across the expanse where countless Persian fires flicker like stars scattered upon the earth, the night is restless. Xerxes broods. His generals argue in hushed tones. The greatest empire the world has known has struck twice, 3 times. With its fiercest soldiers, and the narrow gates have refused to yield. Frustration, disbelief, and anger coil through the Persian lines. And into this tension, into this vast hunger for a way forward, steps one man. His name is Ephialtes. History remembers him not as a warrior, nor as a leader, but as a shadow. He is a Malian, born of the mountains near Thermopylae, where the secret paths twist and turn above the cliffs. He knows the land, as shepherds know the feet of their sheep, as hunters know the trails of deer. But knowledge alone does not define him. He is driven by something deeper, darker, a hunger for recognition, for reward, perhaps for a place in the vast empire that threatens to swallow Greece whole. We cannot hear the exact words he speaks to Xerxes, but we can imagine the tone quiet, eager, tinged with desperation. He offers the king what sheer force could not yet claim: a way around the hot gates. There is a hidden path through the mountains, he says, a track known to locals, guarded by the Phocians. With this road, the Persians may outflank the defenders, pouring into the rear of Leonidas' men like a tide breaking through a crack in stone. For Xerxes, this whisper is not merely news. It is deliverance. Where brute strength faltered, treachery opens the way. The king listens, and the course of history bends. He accepts Ephialtes' offer. In that moment, a single man, nameless before and reviled forever after, shifts the weight of nations with nothing more than a choice. The bargain is struck. Persian soldiers are readied, light-footed men accustomed to mountain paths. Under cover of night, they begin their ascent, led by the traitor's hand. Torches flicker briefly against the ridges before vanishing into the darkness. The betrayal is set in motion. Back in the Greek camp, the night remains deceptively calm. Leonidas moves among his men, as he always has, pausing by the fires, exchanging quiet nods. He sees wariness in their eyes, yes, but also a strange serenity. They have stood against the storm and held. For a brief moment, hope has been kindled. Yet Leonidas knows better than to trust the moment. He senses the fragility of it, like a flame trembling in a breeze. And soon, word comes. Scouts return breathless, voices carrying the weight of inevitability. The Persians are moving through the mountains. The Phocians, stationed there to guard the path, have been caught off guard, driven back by sheer numbers. The enemy is advancing. Leonidas receives this news not with outrage, not with despair, but with the steadiness of one who has long expected fate's arrival. In his silence, there is no curse laid upon Ephialtes, no outburst against the gods. He understands what betrayal does. It is as old as humanity, as natural as courage, as enduring as fear. One man's hunger outweighs the resolve of thousands. One whisper is enough to undo days of valor. He gathers his allies. The council is brief, the air heavy with the smell of dying fires. Leonidas speaks plainly. The pass cannot be held once the Persians descend from the mountain path. Their rear will be exposed. Their line will crumble. The allies must decide to remain, to flee, to fight another day. Many are dismissed. The greater part of the Greek army withdraws under his order, carrying the hope of Greece southward, toward battles yet to come. Leonidas does not condemn them. He knows their survival matters more than any gesture. But for himself, and for the Spartans, the path is already chosen. To retreat would be to betray their law, their way, their very reason for standing here. They have come not to return, but to remain. The Thespians, too, choose to stay. They are not compelled by law, but by love of country, by devotion to freedom. Their leader, Thermopylae, stands firm beside Leonidas, and his men refuse departure. To them, the thought of leaving is more unbearable than the certainty of death. The Thebans are compelled to remain, their loyalty uncertain, their hearts pulled between submission and resistance. Yet whatever their feelings, they too are bound now to the fate of this narrow pass. Leonidas looks upon the faces of his men in the firelight. He sees no panic. He sees resolution. He knows that with dawn their end begins. Yet in their eyes he reads not fear, but clarity. To die here is not tragedy, but fulfillment. The betrayal has not undone their purpose. It has revealed it. What, after all, is courage if it cannot withstand treachery? What is sacrifice if it bends before the whisper of a coward? The Spartans and their allies understand. The gates will fall, but in falling, they will give Greece more than survival. They will give it meaning. In another world, perhaps Ephialtes believed his name would be remembered with gratitude by Persia. That gold and favor would follow him. But history is not kind to those who betray. His very name would become a byword for treachery, a shadow cast long after empires have crumbled. Leonidas will die, but be remembered in stone, in song, in legend. Ephialtes will live, but be remembered in scorn, his memory bound to the darkest side of choice. As the night wanes, the Greeks prepare. Armor is checked once more. Spears bound tightly, shields polished even in the knowledge they will soon be broken. The air hums with quiet resolve. Leonidas walks among them, his presence steady, his silence eloquent. He does not promise victory. He does not deny death. He simply stands, and in that standing, he teaches his men how to meet the dawn. The fires burn low. The sea murmurs against the rocks. The mountains above conceal the approaching enemy, who by morning will spill down upon the pass. Yet in the camp of Leonidas, there is peace. The kind of peace that comes when men have chosen their fate and no longer wrestle with it. The betrayal has done its work. The gates will soon be taken. But the spirit that gathers in the shadows of the hot gates cannot be betrayed. It is carried within each man who prepares to stand, to fight, to fall. The whisper of betrayal moves through the mountains, but in the pass below, silence answers with resolve. As dawn nears, Leonidas and his men ready themselves, not to escape fate, but to embrace it. And so betrayal flows quietly into the final stand, where the circle of courage will close. The sky over Thermopylae softens with the first suggestion of dawn. It is a pale, silver-grey light, diffused through mist that lingers in the hollows of the mountains. The sea murmurs quietly against the narrow shore, its rhythm steady, as though indifferent to the storm about to break upon these cliffs. The fires of the night burn down into embers, and in that stillness there is a strange reverence. The men of Greece rise slowly. Armor is drawn on, the weight of bronze and iron settling upon tired shoulders. Sandals scrape over stone. Shields are lifted, heavy, cold, round discs that smell of oil and sweat. Spears are fitted to hands worn raw from battle. It is not the energy of fresh warriors that fills the air, but the calm gravity of men who know that this is their final dawn. Leonidas moves among them, his presence quiet but unyielding. He has already made his choice, and his men have mirrored it. To leave is possible, to survive is possible, but survival at the cost of dishonor is no survival at all for a Spartan. They are raised from childhood for this moment, not for victory, but for steadfastness, for the willingness to stand where others falter. He gathers the allies. Words are few. Many have already begun their retreat, carrying with them the hope of Greece's future battles. Leonidas does not mock their leaving, he knows it is necessary. The survival of the cause depends on those who live to fight again. But here, in this narrowing circle, only the chosen and the choosing remain. The Spartans stand unshaken, 300 men bound not by number, but by law, by oath, by the covenant between their city and their king. Beside them, the Thespians, led by Demophilus, refuse to withdraw. They are not compelled. They are not bound by the rigid chains of Sparta's code. They choose to remain of their own will, knowing that their choice leads to certain death. And in that freedom, their devotion shines even more brightly. They will fall as brothers alongside Leonidas' men, though no one demanded it of them. The Thebans linger as well. Their presence is less clear, their loyalty ambiguous. History will argue about whether they fought with heart or under compulsion, whether their swords struck with sincerity or hesitation. Yet for this day, whether willingly or not, they stand in the same line, facing the same enemy. Leonidas looks upon them all, and his words are simple, unadorned. He speaks not of conquest, not of glory, but of endurance. They are here to give Greece a chance, nothing more, nothing less. The weight of their deaths will press heavily upon the scales of history. and in that wait, freedom may yet be born. The sun crests faintly over the mountains, and with it the enemy comes. From the ridges above, where Ephialtes' treachery has guided them, Persian soldiers descend. Their numbers spill like water over stone, countless and unstoppable. From the plain ahead, more legions gather, archers and infantry, cavalry restless behind. The world seems to darken beneath the sheer immensity of their presence. Yet within the narrow pass, the Greeks draw together a knot of defiance. The first arrows rise, they lift in swarms like a cloud of locusts blotting the light. The sound is a hiss, a rushing wind. The Spartans lift their shields, interlocking, forming the familiar wall. Arrows clatter against bronze and wood, rattling like rain against roof tiles. Some find flesh, slipping between shield and helm, but the line holds. Then the charge comes. Persian infantry rushes forward, spears thrusting, swords flashing. The clash is sudden, brutal, deafening. Shields slam against shields, spears snap, the cry of men fills the pass. The Greeks fight with the same ferocity as the days before, though they know this battle is unwinnable. Every stroke, every thrust, is given not for victory but for meaning. The Spartans fight in disciplined ranks, the rhythm of their movements honed by years of training. Each man covers the other, each shield overlapping. When one falls, another steps forward to close the gap. The Thespians fight with equal desperation, their courage unmeasured by laws but by choice. Side by side they stand, and side by side they fall. The Persians press again and again, their numbers inexhaustible. The Greeks push them back, the narrowness of the pass working in their favour. But with each surge, the weight of Persia grows heavier. The defenders are driven toward the wall of stone and the sea beyond. Leonidas is at the front. He does not stand apart as king, but as one among his men, spear in hand, shield lifted. He fights with the strength of one who knows his death is not merely his own, but a symbol. His body becomes a beacon to those around him. His courage steadies them, his presence binds them. Time seems to dissolve in the frenzy. The clash of iron against iron, the screams, the thunder of feet upon stone, all merge into one endless rhythm, like the beating of a drum. The defenders are fewer now, their numbers cut down with each wave. Yet the wall holds. Then comes the moment. Leonidas is struck. Accounts vary. Some say by arrow, some by spear, some by blade. But the truth is this: he falls. The king of Sparta, the leader of this last stand, collapses upon the stones, his body pierced, his voice silenced. The Spartans cry out. Their formation wavers, but only for an instant. Rage fills them. They fight not only for Greece now, but for their fallen king. They retrieve his body, struggling to defend it, even as the Persians surge forward. To protect Leonidas' corpse becomes their final act of devotion, their last duty as his men. They will not allow the enemy to desecrate him, even in death. The circle tightens. Step by step, the Greeks are pressed back, until they retreat to the narrowest point of the pass, to the little hillock where their stand will end. Here, surrounded on all sides, they fight to the last. The Persians, enraged and astonished by the resistance, unleash their might. Arrows rain down in storms. Spears and swords crash relentlessly. The defenders fall one by one, but not without taking many with them. The Thespians die beside the Spartans. Their choice, freely made, carries them into eternity. The Thebans, too, share the fate, though their hearts may have been divided. In this place, all are bound together by the same end. At last, there are no ranks, No lines, only scattered warriors fighting with broken weapons, with hands, with teeth, with the last reserves of strength. They fall, but they do not yield, and then silence. The pass is taken. The hillock is strewn with bodies, the ground red with blood. The Persians stand victorious in the physical sense, but in their victory there is no triumph, for what they have faced is not merely an army but an idea. The idea that freedom is worth more than life, that courage can withstand even the certainty of death. Leonidas and his men are gone, but their stand endures. It endures in the whispers of those who retreat southward, carrying news of the sacrifice. It endures in the hearts of Greeks who will gather again, who will fight again, who will believe that resistance is possible. It endures in the memory of all who hear the story, across time, across empires, across centuries. The circle closes at Thermopylae, but its echo opens wide, reaching into every age that asks what it means to stand firm when the world seems overwhelming. Upon the blood-soaked stones of Thermopylae, silence falls where steel once rang. The king lies among his men, the circle unbroken in death. Yet from this ending rises a question that carries forward. What becomes of a world when sacrifice plants its seed within the soil of memory? Dawn breaks over Thermopylae, but it is no gentle light. It falls upon a pass littered with broken spears, shattered shields, and bodies left where they stood. The air still smells of iron and smoke, of salt from the sea, of the faint sulphur rising from the hot springs that gave this place its name. The Persians move through the pass at last, but they do not march with triumph. Their steps are heavy, muted, as if the very earth resents their tread. Victory, when bought with such resistance, feels strangely hollow. The hot gates are silent now, but the silence is not peace. It is the silence of memory beginning its work. For even as the flames of Persian torches consume the dead, the story of the stand begins to stir. It carries itself not by chariot or herald, but by whisper, by the murmuring breath of survivors, by the fearful awe of allies dismissed before the last stand, by the reluctant respect of enemies who saw what a few could do against an ocean of men. News travels swiftly across Greece. From village hearths to city assemblies, the tale grows wings. In Athens, men pause from their feverish building of ships and whisper the name of Leonidas as if it were a shield around their hearts. In Corinth, mothers hold their children tighter, murmuring that courage is not the absence of death, but the shaping of it into meaning. Even in Sparta, where grief wears no tears, the women walk through the streets taller, knowing that their husbands and sons have carved eternity into 3 days. The past is lost, yes, but not the spirit. Thermopylae does not close with ashes, it opens with fire. Xerxes moves south, his army vast enough still to darken the earth with its shadow. His bridges across Hellespont still hold. His fleets still crowd the Aegean. His soldiers still count in numbers beyond reason. Yet something has shifted. The invincible has met resistance. The tide has rolled westward, only to find a rock that refused to bow. And though that rock lies broken, the waves no longer seem endless. Every mile Xerxes marches now is haunted by the hot gates. His soldiers murmur of the phalanx that would not yield, of the king who chose death rather than surrender, of the men who fought with bare hands when their weapons broke. He can silence the mouths of his own men, but he cannot silence their eyes, and in those eyes he sees not only victory, but unease. The Greeks, too, see differently, Before Thermopylae, Persia was a storm cloud beyond the mountains. Vast, unknowable, inevitable. Now it is flesh and blood, wounded by resistance. The Persians can bleed, and once that truth takes root in the human heart, it is hard to uproot. Athens listens most keenly. Themistocles, sharp-eyed and restless, seizes upon the sacrifice as proof of what courage buys time. 3 days at the pass have bought Athens a breath to finish her walls, to rally her sailors, to gather her fleet at Salamis. The ashes of Leonidas become kindling for strategy, but grief still walks beside hope. In Sparta, no wailing is heard, for to mourn openly would dishonor the dead. Yet the city itself seems draped in a silence that speaks louder than lament. The mothers wear their pride like armor, but in the stillness of night, even pride weighs heavy. They do not weep where eyes can see, but they whisper into darkness, asking the old gods to guard their sons where no spear can reach. Among the allies, sorrow and resolve mingle like smoke and flame. The Thespians who chose to die beside the Spartans are remembered with quiet reverence, their names stitched forever into the tapestry of sacrifice. The Thebans, compelled to remain, bear a more complicated memory, their role tangled in threads of doubt and coercion. Yet in every telling of the story, one truth remains: men stood, they held, and they gave themselves to time so that others might live. Herodotus, years later, will walk these fields. He will write of the numbers of the armies, of the strategies and betrayals, but even he will confess that the heart of Thermopylae is not in figures but in meaning. For what does it matter whether the Persians numbered 100,000 or 2 million, if what the world remembers is 300 standing still? The battlefield itself becomes a teacher. Travelers who pass through the hot gates see not only the mountains and the sea, but the ground where men refuse to move. The wind whispers through the stones, carrying the echo of shields striking in rhythm, of voices silent yet unyielding. And those who hear it cannot help but walk a little straighter, as though measured against the memory of that stand. Even Xerxes, in his triumph, feels the unease of legacy. His army may burn Athens, may topple temples, may scatter the fragile unity of Greece, but Thermopylae remains an ember beneath the ashes. He senses, though perhaps dimly, that such defiance cannot be extinguished by fire. It lingers, like smoke caught in the throat, impossible to swallow. And so the aftermath of Thermopylae is not despair, but a strange flowering. Out of ashes grows conviction, out of loss, identity. For the Greeks begin to see themselves not as scattered cities, squabbling and suspicious, but as something greater, as a people capable of standing together against the greatest empire of the age. Thermopylae gives them not victory, but vision. This vision spreads like light upon water. Messengers carry the story across the islands, into the Peloponnesus, even to lands that will never see Persian spears. Each retelling shapes the meaning anew. Some speak of the bravery of soldiers, some of the leadership of Leonidas, others of the strange unity born of necessity. But all agree that something eternal passed through the hot gates, something no empire could erase. And so the past lies in ashes, but from those ashes rises a song, wordless yet enduring. It is sung in the tread of hoplites training in Sparta, in the hammering of shipwrights in Athens, in the quiet prayers of shepherds in the hills. It is a song of defiance, not shouted but carried softly like a flame guarded against the wind. Thermopylae is over, yet Thermopylae begins. In the hush of defeat, the Greeks find not an ending but a beginning, a seed sown in fire, soon to bloom upon the sea. And so, from ashes on land, the story drifts toward water, where Athens waits and Salamis rises on the horizon. The ashes of Thermopylae drift across Greece like unseen smoke. Though the hot gates are lost, their memory clings to the land, whispering through every valley and harbour. The story of Leonidas and his 300 spreads not as rumour, but as revelation. That courage, even when crushed, leaves behind a kind of immortality. And it is this spirit that steadies Athens, restless and watching, as the storm of Persia sweeps southward. Athens has always been a city of words, of debate, of restless minds that weave philosophy and politics into the fabric of daily life. But now, words give way to ships, and thoughts give way to survival. The Persians have burned the fields of Boeotia, marched through Phocis, and now approach Attica itself. The Acropolis still rises upon its rock, but its marble glimmers under a gathering shadow. In this hour, one man's voice grows sharper than the rest. Themistocles, son of Neocles, a man neither of noble birth nor aristocratic lineage, but of piercing foresight. He sees what many do not wish to see, that Athens cannot be held by walls of stone. Only the sea can be its fortress. Only ships, swift and many, can turn the tide of empire. He had urged this long before Thermopylae, convincing the people to pour the silver of Laurium into triremes instead of treasures. Now his vision burns with necessity. The decision is made. Athens will not stand on land. Its citizens will flee, taking to the ships, carrying their lives upon the salt wind. The city itself will be abandoned, left as bait for Xerxes' fury. For some, this feels like betrayal, as if yielding their sacred soil to the invader. But Themistocles argues otherwise. A city is not stone, he says, but its people, its will, its spirit upon the water. And so the evacuation begins. Women, children, and the elderly crowd the harbours of treason and Salamis, their belongings hastily gathered, their voices anxious in the spray of the sea. The men who remain prepare themselves not as hoplites but as sailors, climbing aboard the triremes that wait like restless horses tethered to the shore. Each ship is a slender weapon of oak and pine, light yet deadly, designed to slice through water with the speed of muscle and oar. Meanwhile, Xerxes advances. His army, still countless, pours southward like a flood released. His fleet shadows the coasts, a dark forest of masts bristling against the horizon. The Acropolis burns, its sacred temples consumed in fire, the statue of Athena left helpless to the flames. Xerxes watches with satisfaction, believing the heart of Greece is broken, its spirit dissolved. Yet he misjudges, for Athens has already moved beyond its stones. At Salamis, the straits are narrow, the waters hemmed in by island and mainland. It is here that Themistocles sets his plan. He knows the vastness of Persia is also its weakness. The open sea favours numbers, but the straits favour cunning. If the Persians can be lured into this bottleneck, their fleet will stumble over itself, and the smaller, nimbler Greek ships will strike like hawks upon a flock. Still, unity among the Greeks is fragile. Sparta favours retreat to the Peloponnesus, guarding its homeland beyond the Isthmus of Corinth. Corinthian voices, Aeginetan voices, all murmur different counsels. It is Themistocles who steadies them, weaving argument with persuasion, sometimes even with deception. He sends false messages to Xerxes, feeding him with whispers that the Greeks will flee at dawn. The Persian king, eager for the kill, orders his fleet into the straits. Thus, By trickery as much as strategy, the stage is set. Night descends upon the waters. The Greek ships rock gently, their oars silent, their sailors whispering prayers to Poseidon and Athena. Across the water, the Persian fleet gathers, torches flickering upon the decks of hundreds of ships. The sea sighs with anticipation, as if it too waits for the clash to come. Then dawn. The oars strike water in unison, a heartbeat of wood and muscle. Greek triremes surge forward, their bronze rams glinting in the rising sun. The Persians press inward, confident in their numbers, but soon their vastness becomes entrapment. Ship collides with ship, oars snap, voices cry out in confusion. The narrow straits choke the great armada, its wings clipped by the very sea it thought to command. The Greeks strike with rhythm, disciplined and fierce. Themistocles commands, but it is the rowers and marines who breathe life into his vision. They drive their triremes into the flanks of Persian vessels, splintering wood, capsizing giants. Bronze crashes into timber, water swallows men. The air fills with the sound of breaking, of shouting, of the sea itself roaring, as if in judgment. Upon a golden throne set upon the shore, Xerxes watches. He had come to witness triumph, to record in memory the destruction of Greece. Instead, he sees chaos. He sees his fleet unravel before his eyes, ship after ship swallowed, soldiers thrashing in the waves. The Queen Artemisia of Caria, cunning and ruthless, maneuvers through the turmoil with brilliance, but even her skill cannot salvage the day. The sea, once a mirror of Persian power, becomes its graveyard. The battle rages through the hours until the waters are choked with wreckage, the cries of drowning men echoing across the straits. When it ends, the Persians are broken. Hundreds of ships lost, their vast armada diminished. The Greeks, though bloodied, remain afloat, their spirits swelling with victory. Salamis is no mere naval clash, it is the turning of the tide. For the first time, Xerxes tastes defeat, bitter and undeniable. His dream of swift conquest falters. His numbers, once his greatest weapon, become a burden upon land and sea alike. Fear creeps into the heart of empire, while courage ignites in the heart of Greece. The Athenians, exiled from their burning city, find solace in the smoke rising not from their temples but from the wrecks of Persian ships. Sparta, watching from afar, sees that the sacrifice at Thermopylae has indeed bought what Leonidas sought: time, resolve, the chance to strike. And in this moment, Thermopylae and Salamis become bound together. Land and sea, spear and oar, sacrifice and victory. The deaths at the hot gates are not wasted, they are transformed. For without the defiance of Leonidas, the unity that carried the fleet to Salamis might never have been born. Without the flames of Athens, the cunning of Themistocles might never have found its edge. The echoes of Thermopylae resound upon the waters of Salamis, and the sea answers with its own chorus. That empires, no matter how vast, can stumble against the will of the few who choose to stand. Night falls again upon the straits, this time quiet. The wreckage drifts upon the tide, torches flicker upon the surviving ships, and the stars look down upon a world changed. The Persians retreat, their fleet crippled, their king shaken. The Greeks breathe, not in final victory, but in renewed hope. The sacrifice has indeed bought time, and time, when carried by courage, becomes destiny. From the smoke of Salamis, Greece sees not only survival, but the birth of memory itself, a tale of land and sea woven together. And in that memory, stone begins to rise, for the fallen will not be left without a voice. nor without a monument to whisper their defiance into eternity. The battle is over, the army's long gone, yet Thermopylae lingers. Time passes, as it always does. Empires rise, cities burn, harvests grow, children are born. Yet the narrow pass, where mountain meets sea, is never quite free of memory. The land itself seems to carry the weight of what was done there. The rocks are mute, the waters flow, but those who walk through feel the hush as though the air itself asks them to tread softly. At first, there is only absence. The broken shields are cleared away, the bodies of friend and foe alike are buried or burned. Silence falls, a silence deeper than before. Xerxes moves on with his legions. The Greeks scatter back to their cities. Yet memory, though invisible, refuses to scatter. It gathers, quietly, in the minds of those who heard the story told. Generations pass, and the need to remember grows. For what is courage if it is not carried forward? What is sacrifice if it slips into silence? The Greeks, who measure their lives in story as much as in stone, cannot let the hot gates fade into rumour. Something must remain, so they turn to stone. A monument rises at Thermopylae, not grand like the temples of Athens, nor adorned with the wealth of Corinth. It is simple, almost austere. A stele, a stone slab, upright, weathered by wind and rain. No statues of heroes, no gilded inscriptions. Just words, carved deep into the rock, words so plain they might almost be overlooked. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie. The words belong to Simonides, the poet whose verses could distill eternity into a handful of syllables. His epitaph for the fallen does not thunder, does not boast, does not clamour for glory. Instead, it whispers. It speaks as the dead themselves might speak, quietly, without ornament, with dignity. It reminds not of conquest, but of obedience, that these men died not in pursuit of ambition, but in fidelity to their law, their code, their way of life. The stone becomes a mirror. Every passerby sees themselves in its words. A stranger, any stranger, is invited to carry the story home. The dead need no monuments for themselves. Their bodies have already returned to the dust. But the living need a reminder, a thread tying them to something greater than their own brief years. The monument is that thread pulled taut across time. Travellers stop at the pass, drawn by the tale. Merchants, soldiers, wanderers, each pauses before the stele, reading the lines aloud, sometimes in a murmur, sometimes in reverent silence. Some imagine the clash of shields, others hear only the stillness after the last cry faded. A child may ask their father why men would die so far from home. And the father, in answering, becomes part of the monument itself, adding another layer of remembrance. The stone is weathered by rain, touched by countless hands, scarred by the centuries. Yet the words endure. For words, when carved in meaning, are harder than marble, and so Thermopylae does not vanish. It is kept alive by the discipline of memory, by the willingness of the living to carry the silence of the dead. The choice of simplicity matters. Where other cultures raise triumphal arches, colossal statues, or golden inscriptions, here there is only humility. The Spartans did not seek to be praised in songs of grandeur. They sought only that their obedience be acknowledged, their loyalty recorded. It is as if they wished to vanish into the earth with one final message, that they were faithful unto the end. And in this, the monument does more than preserve the past. It teaches. The traveller learns that greatness is not always found in victories won, but in duties embraced. The passerby learns that death is not to be feared if it fulfills the law of one's being. The words are short, but their echoes are vast. Later ages will remember Thermopylae differently. Some will romanticize the heroism, painting Leonidas as a figure larger than life. Others will question the myth, asking if numbers and details were shaped to inspire rather than record. But the stone remains indifferent to debate. It speaks not of numbers, not of kings, not of betrayals. It speaks only of obedience, of lying down where duty placed them. The monument becomes the silent bridge between history and myth. Without it, perhaps Thermopylae would fade, another lost battle swallowed by time. With it, Thermopylae becomes eternal, fixed in stone, whispered by poets, remembered by nations, a battle turned into a parable. Even today, those words still stand. Travelers from distant lands read them, feeling the centuries collapse into a single breath. The past has changed. The sea has receded, the land has shifted, yet the spirit of the place has not. The stone whispers the same as it did when first carved. Go tell the Spartans. It is as if the dead still call to the living, asking them to be their messengers across the gulf of time. This act of remembering is itself a kind of obedience. The living obey the command of the dead, carrying their story outward, onward, ensuring that Thermopylae remains not a forgotten grave, but a living lesson. The monument binds the present to the past, urging each generation to decide how they, too, will stand when the gates of their own age demand it. And so the monument is not only for the Spartans, it is for all who pass by. It is for those who wonder whether their own lives might be measured against duty, whether they too might one day be asked to give everything for something greater. The stone does not answer those questions, but it does not let them rest either. It sets them quietly in the mind, like seeds waiting for a season to bloom. In the hush of evening, as the last light touches the stele, the stone seems to breathe. Its words glimmer faintly, not as command, but as invitation. Remember, carry, tell. And those who leave the past do so changed, even if only by a shadow of thought that lingers behind the eyes. The monument does not boast. It remembers, and in remembering, it teaches, and in teaching, it endures. Stone whispers where men once shouted, and memory lingers where blood once fell. Yet the meaning of Thermopylae is more than monument. It is choice, the quiet weight of standing when retreat would be easier. From stone, we turn to soul, to ask what courage itself truly means. The past is silent now. The dust has long settled, and the footprints of men, Persian and Greek alike, have been erased by wind and rain. Yet something lingers here, something not bound by soil or stone. Thermopylae has become more than a battlefield. It has become an idea, and ideas do not fade as quickly as blood upon the ground. When we think of Thermopylae, we often see spears glittering in the sun, bronze helmets shining, and the relentless clash of armies. We imagine the ferocity of combat, the cries of men locked in struggle, the storm of arrows that blotted out the sky. Yet if that were all, it would remain but another violent page in history's endless book. Battles are countless, but meaning is rare. Thermopylae endures not because of what was lost, but because of what was chosen. Leonidas could have retreated. The Greeks could have abandoned the pass, saved themselves, regrouped elsewhere. Indeed, many of their allies did just that, but he and his Spartans, and those Thespians who remained, made a different choice. They chose to stand when the weight of the world pressed them toward escape. They chose to lay down their lives not as an accident of war, but as a deliberate offering. In that choice lies the essence of Thermopylae. Courage is often mistaken for fearlessness, as if the brave are simply those who feel no trembling in their bones. Yet the Spartans knew fear. They were raised with it, tempered against it, but never free of it. What set them apart was not its absence, but their command of it. They could look into the abyss of death and not turn away. They could recognize despair and yet refuse to bow before it. Their courage was not a denial of mortality, it was an embrace of meaning larger than themselves. The Greeks had a word for this, arete. It means excellence, virtue, the fulfillment of one's highest potential. For a soldier, arete was not merely victory, it was the noble carrying out of duty, even unto death. At Thermopylae, arete was carved into the mountainside with every thrust of the spear, every shield raised against impossible odds. Leonidas and his men reached their arete not in triumph, but in sacrifice. And yet, sacrifice alone does not grant immortality. Many have died in hopeless causes, and their names are lost to time. What gives Thermopylae its glow across centuries is the clarity of purpose behind that sacrifice. They did not die in vain. They bought time for Athens to prepare, for the fleet to gather, for the fractured Greek city-states to unite. Their deaths were not a curtain falling, but a spark lighting the way to Salamis and Plataea. Thermopylae was a beginning disguised as an end. But beyond strategy, beyond the calculations of war, the meaning of Thermopylae reaches deeper. It speaks to the universal question: what does it mean to live well, and what does it mean to die well? To the Greeks, to die well was not to cling desperately to life at all costs, but to give life willingly for something greater. Leonidas and his men wrote their answer upon the battlefield, not with ink, but with blood. There is something profoundly human in this act. For all our love of comfort, for all our instinct to survive, we are creatures who yearn for purpose. Thermopylae whispers to us because it reveals that purpose can be stronger than fear, even in our own lives. Far removed from spears and shields, we stand at our own narrow passes, moments where the easier path is to retreat, but the truer path demands endurance. The men of Thermopylae show us that sometimes to stand and face what comes is the greatest victory of all. The monument that rose upon that ground bore words that captured this essence. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. It is a quiet epitaph, not a boast, not a cry of conquest. It is simple obedience, simple loyalty, simple purpose. The men did not stand for glory, though glory came. They did not stand for power, though power trembled before them. They stood because their law, their duty, their oath required it. And in that obedience, they transcended mere mortality. It is easy to imagine Thermopylae as a tale of Spartans alone, yet the Thespians too stood and died. They had no law compelling them, no iron discipline demanding obedience. They stayed because they chose to share the fate of Leonidas and his men. In their decision lies another layer of meaning. That true courage is not always born of command, but of choice freely made. When men with every chance to flee instead choose to remain, their stand becomes even more luminous. Xerxes, in his might, could not understand this. He could measure armies, weigh numbers, calculate strength, but he could not fathom why men would give their lives when retreat was possible. He saw corpses piled in the pass, yet he did not see the seed those deaths planted in Greek soil. His empire, vast and dazzling, could command obedience, but it could not command loyalty unto death. That is why Thermopylae remains, while his conquests have faded into dust. History often paints Leonidas as a king, a general, a warrior. But in truth, his greatest act was not one of command, but of example. He showed his men and all of Greece that a leader does not ask what he himself is unwilling to give. He bled where they bled. He died where they died. His crown was not of gold, but of thorns hammered by fate. And that is why his name endures not merely as a soldier, but as a symbol. Thermopylae reminds us that there is a power in limits. The pass was narrow, the defenders few, the hours numbered. Yet within those boundaries, meaning was distilled to its purest form. When the world narrows to a single choice, stand or flee, the essence of courage is revealed. The Greeks, hemmed in by mountains and sea, carved eternity out of that narrowness. Sometimes it is not the expanse of life that defines us, but the sharp edges where life demands a decision. As the centuries roll forward, poets, philosophers, and storytellers return to Thermopylae. They find in it not merely strategy, but spirit. They find the reminder that history is not only written by victors, but by those who fall with dignity. The Spartans lost the pass, yet they won immortality. Thermopylae leaves because it is not bound by outcome, it is bound by meaning. And so the mountain pass becomes a mirror. Each age that gazes into it sees its own reflection. To a world at war, it speaks of unity. To a world in doubt, it speaks of resolve. To a world in fear, it speaks of courage. Thermopylae is not locked in 480 BCE. It walks with us still, whispering that though we cannot choose the length of our days, we can choose their depth. The stones of Thermopylae are silent now. No shields ring upon them, no arrows darken the air. Yet, if you stand there in quiet, you may hear it. The faint murmur of purpose, the echo of choice. The wind carries the memory of men who stood when standing was all they could do. And in that murmur lies the secret that keeps Thermopylae alive. That meaning, once found, cannot be conquered. The flames of courage at Thermopylae do not die with the men who bore them. They flicker onward, lighting paths through the centuries. And as Greece moves forward, scarred yet unbroken, another question rises softly from the ashes. How will the world remember? And so, dear listener, we leave the hot gates. That narrow place where mountain meets sea, where silence and sacrifice still linger like an echo in stone. The fire of Thermopylae has long since dimmed, yet the candle of that night burns quietly in time. Their story is not just of spears and shields, but of meaning, of men who looked into the vastness of empire and chose to stand, not because they expected to live, but because they longed to leave something eternal behind. Though centuries have passed, the whisper of their courage hums in the quiet. It reminds us that every age has its gates. Moments when each of us is called not to win, but simply to stand, to hold, to endure. Thermopylae teaches us that even in loss there can be triumph, for the measure of a life is not its length, but the truth it serves. Thank you for sharing this quiet hour with me tonight. In listening, you've carried their story forward, keeping alive the wisdom of the past. I am grateful for your presence here, for this shared stillness across the distance of the world. You are part of this circle, a witness to memory, a keeper of echoes. Now, let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders. Let your thoughts soften like leaves drifting upon a still pond. May your dreams carry you gently through the night and may you rest beneath the hush of history's lullaby. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in and time itself slows to a whisper. You are always welcome to return whenever you need a soft place to rest among the stories of long ago. Good night, dear friend. Sleep well and let the echo fade into peace.